Hey guys, welcome back to week 5 of the Deadbolt budget build. Now, last weekend was the Thanksgiving holiday weekend, and while I was out of town, I took the truck with me and was going to take the opportunity to take this truck on the trails and do a little bit of hiking with it. I was having a good time down in the state park here in southern Missouri and ended up breaking a steering knuckle arm. Now, like I said in the earlier videos, those plastic links that come on this truck are great for durability because they allow things to flex. That's not necessarily the feel that you may want as you go along. You want something that reacts more to exactly what you want to do. But it does have the durability concerns as I've demonstrated here while running it this last weekend. Now, the upgrades that I have planned to the steering in this car are not simple stock replacement parts made in aluminum. You can do that, it'll work fine, and it'll be stronger. However, if you do a little bit of research and choose wisely, you can get parts that are going to be stronger, but also offer other performance benefits. That's what I want to do. I want to show you the things that I think are going to make the best performing truck. While they may take a little bit more work to achieve, in the end, I think that it's going to make that much more difference and give you a better performing vehicle. Now, that's not in the budget for this week though. Last week we went just a little bit over budget with the wheels. That's going to come out of this week's budget. Also, since I broke that knuckle, I'm also going to have to replace that with a stock part for this week so that I can get it up and running, because having the truck not running is not an option right now. So that's also going to come out of the budget. So I've got to play around with what I've got left. And I think I've got a couple of parts that I can throw in this week and make that happen. So this week what we're going to do is we're going to swap out that stock 27-turn sealed can motor that comes with this truck for a new motor from Holmes Hobbies. This is the Crawlmaster 13-turn Sport. Don't let that 13-turn jump out at you right away. I'll explain a little bit about what that means and why it's very similar to the 27-turn motor that came in this car. Now, the Crawlmaster series of motors is a motor that I'm very familiar with using. I've used them in everything from SCX10s to Wraiths. They work great, especially when you're really looking for that low-end crawlability, that slow creep, or that zero to startup speed. That is where these Crawlmaster motors really shine. Now, why that is, and why the 13-turn sounds different than what you may have heard before, is because the construction of the armature, the little piece in the middle of the motor, is different than what you may have seen typically. The Crawlmaster motor uses a 5-slot armature versus a typical motor using a 3-slot. Now, when just looking at the two armatures, you'll get and see why they're called a 5 versus a 3. You can see one has 5 segments that go around it versus the other one having 3. Now, why one says 27-turn and one says 13-turn is because that's the number of times you wrap copper around the armature. Now, a 27-turn is 27 times around 3 different segments, while the 13-turn is 13 turns around 5 segments. So in the end, if you multiply that out, you come out with a pretty similar amount of copper. And that's why these motors work just fine with your stock ESC, even if the turn limit that is labeled on your ESC may differ a little bit, because they're normally referring to a 3-slot armature. Now, that could have got a little bit confusing, and I apologize for that. If you have questions, let me know. Also, Holmes Hobbies has some explanations on these as well. Him being the motor guy, his may be a little bit more clear than mine are. Now, swapping out a motor is not the most complicated thing in the world to do. Going to try and make it pretty quick, just show you some overall things in case you've never done this before. If you have, this is not going to be very interesting, but it will not also be very long. The first thing you're going to do is remove the 4 bolts from the skid plate that are holding the transmission into the truck. Remember to clip any zip ties that you have holding the wires that connect your motor to the ESC. Then simply remove the 2 bullet plugs that connect the motor wires from the motor to the ESC. Now the whole transmission is free from the truck. First thing you're going to do is remove the spur gear cover. Next, remove the 2 bolts that hold the motor to the motor plate of the transmission. Now that your motor's free, remember to remove the pinion because we're going to reuse that. And then we're going to desolder the wires that are connected to the backside of this motor. Now, the wires that come with this truck may not be the most efficient, especially when using these bullet plugs. Now, you can remove this entire assembly and try and go with one straight shot of wire between the ESC and the motor. But for now, with this ESC, I'm not going to worry about that. I'm simply going to replace the pigtails from the old motor onto the new motor, and then we're just going to reverse the process and bolt this all back into the truck. That's going to do it for this video, guys. Next week, we're going to get back in, start doing some more upgrades yet again, and we're going to keep continuing to make this truck just a little bit better every week. Really looking forward to some of the upgrades that I've already started planning for the future of this truck, and in the end, I think this thing's going to be a really capable crawling rig. So, with that said, we'll see you guys next Thursday for week number 6.